latest of what's going on. We have enough overlapping circles where I think it should be. I would think it's a little bit of a refreshing conversation piece in a different perspective.
Well, I think let's just open with that. Like,
Yeah.
why are we here today?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yes, perfect way to start.
Yeah.
You guys might be thinking, why are these two people together? A lot of people think, oh, real estate agents are always in competition with each other.
Yep.
You know, we've been meeting every other week for, I think it's over a year now. If I'm looking back at it.
Not well. You and I have been meeting periodically before that, but we started our mastermind group probably, was that April?
Yes, that's probably right.
Yeah.
That's probably right. But it's really just a sense of collaboration of what do you see going on in the market. Mm-hmm. We're all professionals. We all have overlapping circles, but we all do business very differently.
Yep.
And I think that's been a really refreshing thing every other Tuesday morning, and which brought us to this conversation of what can we do to share with other people.
Well, I think, first and foremost, as we look at this, like real estate is a very lonely industry, right?
Yeah.
Because historically, it's each agent for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think from the outside looking in, it's kind of a dog-eat-dog world, when from the inside out, we're collaborators more than competitors, right? As much as our circles overlap, we have probably more of a bond than people know about or think. And oftentimes we share things with each other, right? Obviously nothing that's not confidential, right?
Correct. Welcome to the trenches.
Yeah.
You know, pull your microphone just a little bit closer, just kind of like a hang loose right there.
Yep.
So,
but, for us, I think it's good to have somebody that you can share with, somebody who experiences the same struggles that you do, that's in the market that you're in, fighting to get deals done, obviously in a win-win manner, right? Because I think the secondary conversation that goes behind kind of the competition versus collaboration is this thought that for one person to win, it means another person has to lose, and that's just not the reality.
No.
Right?
Right. That's a great point. I think the general public is that we're all this.
Yeah.
But no, we all have a fiduciary responsibility to what's best for our customers. Sellers want to sell, buyers want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's like, agents, get out of the way and let the deal happen.
Yep.
I think you've experienced agents like that. It's really refreshing when you get to deal with a good professional on the other side, almost where I've actually given agents reviews saying, that was great.
I have too.
I mean, it's a fantastic thing. It's kind of unheard of. The first time I did it, and she's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I said, "I thought it was great to work with you. You know, we're not exactly in the same markets here. I think people should know how good it was."
Yeah, so. Exactly. I've done that too. I've written 5-star Google reviews for people, and they were blown away. And I think it's a simple professional courtesy that we can do for each other, but also it just sets the stage for future transactions, right? Like I don't know how many deals I've done with you and Jeremy and Erick and Tommy, and this is a real small pond.
Yep.
And if we're all going to be decent sized fish, we all gotta eat together, right?
Exactly. Which kind of goes on to the first slide I have pulled up is this home annual sales.
Okay. I actually didn't even get the text message.
Oh, you didn't get here. Well, you'll get to see that.
Okay.
Then.
Yep.
But which leads us, if we're all fishing in the same pond.
Yep.
What's going on? And I can tell you, as things start to become a little bit of a struggle inside the real estate market, where it's not just placing a sign and you're going to get 50 million offers and 100 zillion showings, where it is that conversation amongst professionals that, hey, I've actually worked with Erick before. He brought a strong offer. I haven't worked with this other agent. They've got some holes in their offer. All of this, it is all down to a good cooperation of a track record. Now, you may only sell that one house once every 11 years or whatever the actual statistic is. It's about that in this area. But it matters because we're going to do way more deals together than the Smiths selling one house.
And could not agree more.
Yeah.
I think, from a fiduciary standpoint, like we had just mentioned, obviously it's important to get them the best deal, but we also have to remember the best deal is one that crosses the finish line.
Correct.
And when you're dealing with an agent that can get it there, it's far easier than one that you've never dealt with. You have no idea if they're supported. Rarely do you know how many transactions this agent's completed versus somebody who lives and works in your own backyard that you see, weekly,
Yeah.
bi-weekly, whatever.
Yep.
And you're showing their properties, they're showing your properties. You know, you got to work together.
Yeah.
And so it makes things a lot easier.
It makes sense. So I think this is the one you brought me, was the annual home sales.
Yeah. So
Closer to you.
I recently had the opportunity of going out to Austin for Gary Keller's Top Mastermind. And, you know, Keller Williams as an organization is great, especially on the tracking front, right? Because it's really the leading economics that we get to lean into as we project what's going to happen. So, you know, as you and I have talked about, last year, 24, there were 4.1 million home sales in the U.S. And just for reference, you know, we're speaking of that as that's 8.2 million sides for real estate agents.
Because there's a buyer and there's a seller.
And a seller, right? Slight increase of 4.2. We're kind of experiencing a bit of stagnation. I think, you know, as an active agent, I think we do have to mentally kind of separate part-time agents and full-time agents.
Yeah.
You know, when looking at this, nothing wrong with either. But you know, if you're somebody that's active and in the trenches, and your livelihood solely depends on what this means. So looking at, you know, projections for 26, you know, I've heard anywhere from 4.4 to 4.6. Now, with everything that's kind of going on in the economy, I think the kicker for this, and this will be in a future slide coming up, will be confidence. Because I think you've experienced it. I've experienced it. We have people out there who they want to buy and sell, but they have zero confidence moving forward because they're so unsure of what's going to happen with. Look at Target layoffs.
Yeah.
Right. Look at all the layoffs kind of across the industry or across multiple industries, and what it actually means for them moving forward in terms of, if I buy this house today, which, you know, we're looking at still record pricing, even though we've taken a little bit of a skid back, at least here locally. They want to know not just, can I afford this house today, but can I afford this house in 6 months? Can I afford it in a year? And consumer confidence, as we'll get to, is really at almost an all-time low.
Yeah. Let's just jump right to it, since we're right on that
we can
topic.
jump to that.
And
Sure.
Consumer sentiment right here.
Yeah, consumer sentiment. So
quite an aggressive drop off.
Quite an aggressive drop off, right? And we have to look at the correlations there of what was happening during those times, right? You can see that little dip. 2005 was great. We start to dip in 2006. That's when we see, you know, what in our industry is called the Great Recession, right? You see that grow, right? Home prices took a dip. They became more affordable. Rates tended to be very favorable. You know, when I started in real estate,
oh gosh, it's one of these stories. I've been doing this for some. We're gonna jump right into that, huh?
We're gonna do it uphill both ways,
Yeah,
buddy.
yeah,
That's how I
exactly.
showed. No, but you know, when I got in, that was end of 2006. We had rates at 7.5%, 8%, and that was on par. Rates got to 6%, and I remember telling people, "This is phenomenal. What a steal you're getting." And then what happened? They just they kept going down, right? So, you know, we saw, if we're looking at the graph, we can see 7, 8, 9, everything kind of climbs, right? Even as we get into, you know, COVID era 3%, it wasn't even necessarily the pricing, because everyone thought it was a good time to buy a home when rates were at 2.5% or 3%, and they could lock in.
Yeah.
Right. But now, as rates increase, we see that kind of bottom of the curve, and everyone kind of gets scared. And we saw stuff happening with the election, right? We saw stuff happening, you know, worldwide. We see even stuff like natural disasters that are occurring, that is all affecting this. And so we've seen basically pre-COVID era pricing just absolutely hammer down consumer sentiment.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's take a break on like national version of kind of what are we seeing locally? I mean, is that, and or maybe a theoretical? Why do we maybe think it's happening outside of presidential election, all that stuff?
Sure.
Do you think anything has to do with the ease of information and sharing any opinion and every opinion? And if we go back to Mr. Erickson's social studies class, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
And that is 100% the real estate market right now. I
Mm-hmm.
think they sell, I'm not going to name any publications right now because we're both licensed real estate agents. But again, it's easy to click on the sky is falling, everything. And that's what people, read,
It's clickbait,
yeah,
right?
it doesn't exactly line up to who people are active in the market.
Well, and I think, one of the things that's interesting about like this conversation is I think locally you and I have enough circles and know enough people to know that we're not out there just for clickbait, right? We're here to be a resource if and when people need that resource. But to your point about information, everyone's an expert on Instagram.
Yeah.
Everyone's an expert on Facebook. And it doesn't necessarily matter what they post because they're not after the truth. They're after clicks.
Correct.
Because clicks get them paid.
100%.
And so I think part of the reason that you and I decided to have this discussion and look at these slides specifically is because it takes a broader economic view over time and not necessarily a snapshot of what showed up on Instagram that morning.
Right.
Which
is, yeah, fantastic. There's one here. Oh, there's a nice picture of us. This one right here, which is prices. When we take a look at a snapshot of time, I think it's a good transition to kind of talk about pricing as it relates to people who really care about it. If we're going to buy or sell in the near future, this is actually pertinent to them.
Very pertinent. Very pertinent. So why don't you take this at the maybe more of the local level, and then we can have a conversation. I want to slow down here just for a bit and have a conversation with you about, you and I know the term shadow inventory. I want to talk about what it means for the people that we have, both buyers and sellers.
Yeah.
A lot of times both, right? Move up, move down, who have been waiting and in that waiting period. So talk about pricing here locally for Wright County.
Well, this one, as we can see, this is your first time seeing this slide.
Yep.
You can see that drastic change in the last 5 years. And we talk about affordability. And when we look at who has transacted in that 21, 22 era, people were moving because they didn't like the color of their walls, and they moved down the street. They're like, hey, let's cash out some equity.
Yep.
It saves us a payment on our interest rate. Let's go through that hassle. I'm like, that's not happening these days.
Yep.
And it's showing on, the previous slides of the actual inventory transactions have gone down.
Yep.
But yet pricing has gone up. That's, for the last 5 years, going from this is all Wright County specific. Things on market have gone up. We could talk a little bit about that. I have a theory, and it's not solely my own. I read it somewhere. It was all those people that pre-bought in like 21, 22, 23 might have been people that were probably actually going to buy in 24, 25, 26, but they're like, you know what? We'd be kind of dumb to not buy right now.
Well, and let's be honest. We all get sucked into the hype, right?
Yeah.
When everybody's buying and the only thing in the news is 3% interest rates and, mortgages the most affordable that they've ever been and money's cheap and your house is going to sell fast and you're going to get 500 showings and it's going to go for, above asking price. It's not what price we're going to put on it. It's what price are you going to take at the end of the day when there's 40 offers? It's easy to get sucked into that hype. That's sexy, man.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't want that?
So they make HGTV shows out of.
But for a while, that was reality.
100%.
Right? And you're like shuffling as fast as you can to the next house. So I agree with you. I think there are a lot of people who probably moved unnecessarily, or maybe not unnecessarily, maybe because they wanted that experience that they weren't quite getting, but they escalated or expedited that process when they weren't ready.
And what rewind a couple of years, you hear, everybody's uncle that went through, everything's going to crash and fall. Everything's like that. There's always that one uncle that actually hasn't purchased anything since the 80s.
He's also an inspector.
Wished he would have done it again in 2009 through 15.
Yep.
They're glad that they didn't take that advice at that point. Oh, okay, we don't really trust that uncle. But going from there, the prematurely, I think they're really glad that they did. When we saw escalation clauses, hey, we're going to go 10% above, I mean, we saw some really ridiculous things.
Yeah, incredibly, and the guarantees that people would have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we talked earlier about the fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many agents I'd get the offer and I'd look at it and I'd go, "We're not going to praise for that.
Hmm.
There's no chance that this house is worth that, but they
Yeah.
can afford it. They have the guarantees." And so I have my same fiduciary responsibility to the seller as well, right?
Yeah.
To help them net the most amount of money if that's their goal.
Right.
So it's such a catch-22 in so many of these circumstances because the market you sell in oftentimes is the same market you buy in.
Right. And so does it really matter?
That's a good question. Does it matter? I think, yeah. I mean, I do think so. But can we hit back to that home price slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we look here, we see, a bit of a roller coaster. We are above trend right now. That white line that you guys will see going through the middle, that's the 4% annualized long-term trend. Okay. So if all things are considered equal and you're going to stay in your home for 20, 30 years, which a lot of people are actually doing right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They may have moved every 5 to 8 years prior to, we'll call it 2018, 2020, maybe pre-COVID era. Real estate's going to have that 4% trend line. If we extend that out to 2035, if we extend it out to 2056, it's not going to matter. So there's a reason they say, don't wait and buy real estate and wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can bank on 4% appreciation.
Yep.
Maybe not in the small little incremental time period.
Not in the 90-day window.
Right.
but maybe the 9-year or 19-year or anything like that. I love this conversation because we have, again, take everything with a grain of salt when you hear people's conversations. And I like this chance to get to explain, what do you mean by that? Because there's only so much attention you can grab at any given second. It's like, what do you mean by that? It's like 19 years, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Well, okay, 90 days is a pretty short time too. Let's just stay the course.
Yeah.
Have that conversation of what's important to you right now. I think we talk about quality of life. Not just the ROI. A lot of people say, "Oh, this is your biggest investment ever."
Yeah.
Well, if you really think about, you need some place to live, and you talk a little, you do a little bit more investing than I do, But when I'm working with residential buyers, like home is you're basically a glorified savings account.
Yep.
Really, it's not easy money to get back.
Absolutely
As far as go spend it
to
on
actualize.
junk. It's not liquid.
Yep.
It's a roof over your head.
Yep.
It's warm. It's everything like that. If you think about it like that versus I'm going to make $1 gazillion on this, because you always have to have a place to live.
Well,
you have to have oxygen and water.
And we frame it two ways, right? So if you're looking to invest in real estate, you have to let the math be the math.
Yeah.
Right? That's return on investment.
Correct.
What you and I have conversations about, especially at the local level, we deal with a lot of families who are moving up, who have outgrown their home, right? We look at not just ROI, return on investment, but we have to frame it as return on experience and what that actually does for someone. Because the reality is you may want to buy a home. Right? We've had this conversation numerous times about people that we've had sitting kind of on the fence who have just waited and waited and waited, and it was never the right time, but they've hated their house. They hate living in it, right? And so you have to, when you're buying for yourself, when you're buying for your kids and your wife and whoever else you may be living with, right? You have to look at the return on that experience. Yeah. Because it gives you the opportunity to thrive in your house and be happy versus looking at it every day and saying, I wish we would have moved 5 years ago. Yeah. To expand on that a little bit, the return on experience, we each have kids. Mm-hmm. If our first house, everybody would have been on top of each other. Yep. Sharing rooms. Mm-hmm. It's like buying that little bit bigger house. Yes, it maybe stretched the budget a little bit or what you didn't want to spend,
but it's also, then your kids have some elbow room. They
Yep.
have a backyard to play in.
Yep.
They have a park down the street. You know, those are
Yep.
the things that you're talking about on the experience level.
Absolutely.
Or even kind of going, you know, to the lake or to acreage or to a pool, you know, all of these other things that in a snapshot of time,
Yeah.
I don't think you're ever going to regret it.
So the most recent stat that came out of this this KW mastermind that I was at is average age of a first-time home buyer is now 40 years old.
We do not have that slide.
We don't
But it
have
was-
that slide.
yeah.
But it's gone up from, it was 28, 32, 35, 38, 40 years old. Average age of a trade-up buyer, right, is currently 62. So we're almost at the point now with economic uncertainty, with rates where so many people have held back that they're almost better off saying, I'm just not going to do anything at all if that's what they're going to do. Like, because it is a choice, right? Whether you choose to make the jump or not, you're making that choice.
Mm-hmm.
But 62, most people's kids are going to be out of the house at that point, right? I mean, if we look at most life cycles, right?
Yeah.
So I think the question really becomes, and I think why a lot of people lean into you for your expert guidance on that is, how do we make that happen?
Yeah.
Right. And I think what has absolutely crippled the decision-making process for a majority of people who've wanted to move up is the fixation on 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rate it's a point of personal pride for people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm never moving. I got 3%.
Yeah.
Well, you hate your kids, or you hate your house.
Whoa, geez.
You don't hate your kids. You hate that your kids are on top of each other in this tiny house that you're in. You've outgrown it. Like, at what point do you say, I have a very short life and short time on this planet. I'm going to make the most of it and do whatever I can. And we have tools for that, right? Like, if we look at the volume of equity in homes today,
it's insane.
It's insane. It's 40 to 60% in a lot of cases. 40% of homeowners in America have no mortgage.
When you think about that, pretty crazy. Because
Wild.
There's the bookended sides of, oh man, we're going to have this mortgage for 30 years, and it's a mindset in a certain demographic or a certain population.
Yeah.
And then there's other ones, I'm going to scream this thing down as fast as I can, and I'm never going to have a mortgage again, But when I first saw that, when I first started, a few years ago now, I thought, really? 30% don't have a mortgage at all? It was just a mindset thing. I'm like, that's so many people without a mortgage.
Yep.
And it's something that we strive for, it's,
Yeah.
But I thought that's a pretty neat statistic, and I think people would be surprised at that.
Well, and so let's kind of counteract that. Okay, let's just walk through a little hypothetical scenario. You bought your house in 2013.
Yep.
It's a 3-level split in Monticello. Okay, you paid $219, maybe
for a very nice one.
For a very nice, 20, okay, so let's
probably 140.
Let's just say 160.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that house today is worth probably 4.25.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So if you want to get into a larger 2-story, or maybe move, build on 10 acres, right? That's everybody's dream. We just want 10 acres.
Yeah.
We want to build a nice little, maybe a house.
Yeah.
Everyone,
barn dominium.
Barndo. I love the barndo.
Yeah.
But let's just say you want to build something, even, it's weird to say modest is like 3,000 or 3,500 square feet for so many people. 3,000 square foot 2-story on 10 acres. Yes, you're going to be into that for a sizable amount of money, but the volume of equity that you actualize, that the government is allowing you to take tax-free, by the way, into your next home,
Yep.
right? Oftentimes, there's new cars in the driveway. Everybody has the nicest stuff. We've got a boat and a bunch of trailers and things like that.
Yep.
We can actualize that equity and get rid of the boat payment, get rid of the car payments, still have that nice chunk. And yeah, you're into a payment, but the payment might actually be less than the car payment, the boat payment, and the payment on any of those depreciating liabilities, because they're not assets.
Correct.
Right? They're liabilities. You may actually be able to do that in a much faster time frame at 6% than you were locked in at 3% because you were proud of that rate.
Because the math is the math.
Because the math is the math.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about math is it doesn't lie to you.
Right.
Right?
And it's worldwide. 1 plus 1 is 2.
Yeah.
So
most places.
But yeah, no, that's a great point, and I love the point. And again, we didn't really have an outline of what we're going to talk about right here.
Script.
You talk about the car payments, everything, and all of this. Now, I'm not against people having nice things.
No.
I mean, it's like the American dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to do this. I do think it does cripple some people from entering the market.
I would agree. And to reiterate, there's no judgment on any of it. If you want to spend any amount of money on anything that you want, nice truck, nice boat, nice cars, I don't care. That's your prerogative. Right. We just also can't have both and complain about it.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
And you're in a different tax bracket if you can have all
yeah.
of them. So, I mean, which is great, which means you're probably not complaining about it.
Right.
Great point. Again, to each their own.
Yep.
Like when we go back to it bleeds, it leads. A lot of people are like, well, housing is unaffordable. Actually, what is unaffordable is the car payments. It's the camper payment. It's the credit cards. It's all it's groceries as well. I mean, so we're not only blaming it on the consumer doing these things, but it is consumer debt that's actually unaffordable. And you know what? Dave Ramsey said, why would you go buy the car payment to try and impress somebody you don't know who doesn't like you? At a stop sign you'll never see again. Yep. It's like, okay, reel in back a little bit. I mean, again, there's no judgment. You'd be so surprised at how many people aren't thinking about you.
Yeah.
If you just maybe realign your goals, if you want to buy a house.
Well, and I think another interesting point about that, and you brought it up earlier, is the 30-year mortgage, right? Yeah. We hear, you've heard the 50-year mortgage, right? You and I have had our own discussions about that.
Yeah.
But I did hear a hot take the other day on it, and I wanted to chat with you on that just briefly, because the average age of the first-time buyer is now 40 years old, right? Which means you basically completely wait from the time that you're 18 and graduate high school, 22 years till the time you're 40 to start building wealth through real estate. And really, this I think if we're going to say anything about this conversation, it's an update on the market.
Yeah,
it's where do we sit as kind of at the national level, like you said, the 30,000 foot view and the 300 foot view, and at the local level, right?
Right. Yep.
But I think it's also a chance to help people realize the volume of wealth that can be built through owning real estate, even if it's just your own home.
100%.
Right?
Even in a bad time.
In a bad time. Right?
Obviously tongue in cheek there.
So we talk about the 50-year mortgage, or we hear about it, right? It gets announced politically. Every news channel covers it. Everyone's first reaction is, oh my God, that's going to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
When you look at the average amount of time that a buyer holds a mortgage, that standalone mortgage is 6 to 8 years. So in the event that these do exist, right, and they get rolled out publicly, I don't think it's going to be anybody's first choice.
Correct.
But if it is the only option that allows them to start building equity and reduces the age of the first-time home buyer and allows them, with 4% appreciation, mind you, to stay in that home for 5 to 6 years at a little bit lower payment, and they can capture that appreciation on a sale, get rid of the 50-year mortgage, and then roll into a 30, I might be changing my tune on it.
Yeah.
When used appropriately.
And I come at maybe a little bit more of an emotional feeling about it. Is one, it's statistically proven that, besides of a couple of other things, but home ownership is one of the most stabilizing things in a house. Like owning your own, yes, it might not be perfect. Nothing ever is. But it's one of the most stabilizing things in a community is home ownership. You're not renting everything. There's not overturn right there. It's people are planting roots there. It's like, yes, it's what builds communities. It's what builds community support. It builds good schools. All of these things of why it's like, I could change my tune if that was the only option, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, I look at it, let's have a deeper conversation of maybe where can we turn other dials to accelerate that wealth gain.
I want to be really clear, and I did not say that it doesn't make me want to throw up thinking about it.
Yeah, true.
And paying someone else for 50 years, right?
Yeah.
But if all those dials are turned,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the only option for somebody to accomplish a dream of theirs, and they have a plan for the future, I think that the key to this is thinking long term, right? Like we look at the graphs, and we look at, you know, appreciation, and we look at all that. You have to have a long term picture and a long term goal, because like you mentioned, whether it's 90 days or it's the reality is for you to recapture the call it 6 to 8% in selling fees, right?
Yep.
Overall, because we're TCPA compliant, we don't discuss commissions here.
Correct.
Right? You have to be in that home a minimum of 3 years with standard or low appreciation.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, if we look at the averages across the board, just to break even, right? So if it's 6 years, 8 years, whatever it is, you know, you're going to have that appreciation. A lot of that does depend on the economics of the time that you're in the home. But if we account for standard appreciation, maybe it allows for somebody to take advantage of a program that they didn't otherwise have an option.
Now, that is one thing. This coming up year, we've talked a little bit about it. And, you know, I don't have any slides on this. Is the economics behind it and buying programs. You know, we're lucky to be in an area where there are zero down programs that help you get there. Again, probably not my first choice of just like creating the actual stability, but like a USDA zero down loan. Is that still on? Yeah.
Yep.
Zero down loan it gets you into that first, you know, we had plenty of people use it in that 2013 to 2020.
It was the best.
It's fantastic. We're right on the edge of it, you know, which is fantastic. My best friend purchased his back fence line is the map line.
That's the map
line.
Boy,
he got as close as he could get. You know, it's a good thing your house isn't on the other side of that fence. Yeah. But, you know, so there's all of those other resources that when we partner with lenders and all of these other things, let's have a conversation about it. Because if real estate's one thing, it is not a one size fits all. You know, you can talk
well said
30,000 foot view all day long.
Yep.
But again, it's, but Eric, I've got these other things that are in my life that, you know, the Smiths don't have, you know, what can we do here? It's like, that's why we encourage people, let's have a conversation, a confidential conversation.
Explore.
No let's at least spitball some ideas of how do we get there?
Well, and how often do you run into somebody that says, well, I don't have enough for a down payment. Well, if that down payment can be zero, do you have enough?
Correct. Yep.
You know, and so to your point, it is not one size fits all, and it starts with an exploration, right? Yeah. It starts with a conversation with you, with me, with a lender. You know, let's talk about those goals long term. I think, you know, my point is, both of our points kind of converging is, yes, we can't look at 1990 to 2028 or 2029 or whatever, right? But we don't also have to look at just a 3-month or 1 year window of I'm going to buy and I'm going to sell and I'm going to do this. We have to have some type of realization that this is a process of life and this isn't an event, right?
Yep.
And so we need to have kind of a holistic view on what does it mean long term as we move through from one home to the next and the next.
Yeah.
God willing.
Because at the end of the day, none of it really matters until it does for you. You know, like most of the people listening right now are not going to transact real estate in the next year, 2 years, 5 years.
Right. Well,
but I mean, you just have to be ready. So that snapshot, I wanted to transition into, you know, I'm kind of a local data freak.
You're a nerd.
There. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I love it.
Appreciate it.
The best kind of nerd.
So I like to pull quarterly reports, and everybody's familiar with Zillow, or estimated, right? You know, it rhymes with Schmillo.
Okay. You can't say that on.
Yeah, oh yeah, I can't. But everybody's familiar with their Zestimate.
Sure.
You know, oh,
Yep.
I can't say that either. Dang it. I'll bring it up with the boss.
Schmestimate.
Schmestimate.
Schmillo and Schmestimate.
You know, and all these other automated valuations,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're at least a little bit familiar with them.
Yep.
So I do a quarterly one for everybody in my database.
Yep.
You know, and in some of our mastermind group, they say, how do you do that? You know, okay, well, it's first of all, you just got to find them and
Yeah.
write them down.
Yep.
So thanks. Love you, Kevin. But
Shout out.
so when we take a look at that, my September dates, you know, from, let's see, 3 months before September, which would have been June,
Mm-hmm.
we saw an average of like 3.14 increase in those automated values
Okay.
on valuations in that 3-month window.
Yep.
Now, when I'm sending them in December from those September dates, we're seeing a negative 1.02%,
Yeah.
which is like, oh my goodness, the sky's falling. How did it fall, you know, in 90 days? Well, when you look at it from when you purchased it in 2014, you're still up 145%.
Right.
You know, so that's what you kind of have to look at. But, you know, I always like to keep that stuff as knowledge is never a bad thing.
It's never,
you know?
no, it's not. And I think one thing that you do really well in that, and I've always admired you in what you send out in your analysis of the data at the local level. But the one thing that we talk about is there's a difference between what happens online and Zillow and the valuations and all that and what happens in your gut, right, as an agent. Because when you're in the trenches, showing homes, pricing property, monitoring showing activity, you feel what's upcoming.
Yes.
Versus data.
Yep.
Data is great because, like we mentioned before, if the math ain't mathin', it might not make sense.
Yeah.
But Zillow is, and Schmillo,
Yeah.
and so many other data points are so far rear facing that it's like driving 100 miles an hour down the road looking in your rear view mirror. You can't make an adequate decision, good or bad, if you're doing that.
Correct.
And so I love what you do with that. The difference, I think, and the kind of the funny thing is, if you have a professional agent, trust the professional agent on which way it's going because they feel it right here. And there is a way to balance your head and your heart in this, right? And so while we rely on data, we don't exclusively trust the data either.
100%. Which we talked about shadow listings or
shadow inventory.
You know, I love that, and I think it's a really good transition because how many times have you gone onto like pillow.com and found, you know, 1,500 views and 67 saves?
Yep.
You know, but what we can see, we have one right now, and I talked to the seller, you know, right now we're mid-December.
Yep.
You know, we've had a ton of snow and cold.
Yep.
Kind of uncharacteristically.
Yeah.
But we can see data, you know, online showing activity of people sitting on the fence.
Yep.
So, I mean, built up inventory. And I go back 1 year, we had one that was kind of struggled to sell, you know, wasn't getting too many showings. But I said, hey, look, we kind of had that meeting of just like, what are we going to do here? I said, well, don't pull it off right now because look at all of these people. They're on the fence right now. They're waiting for that event.
Yeah.
And that event might be the first of the year or when they get their tax rebate check or, you know, when the snow melts. Like they're doing that. And we're under contract in the next 7 days. It was fantastic. So, but if it would have pulled their listing, it wouldn't have had that buyer.
Yep.
So we get to see how many people are on the fence of, even though it might not be showing up, of people walking through the door just yet, which leads us also to some other conversations this time of year of, sellers are like, we're going to do something in 2026. Let's start having those conversations. I'm assuming your agents are having those as well.
Yeah, we are. And with the lack of inventory, and obviously, you know, we've seen it creep up. 7-county metro area, we had, you know, almost 8,000 active listings a couple weeks ago. We're continuing to drop by about 300 listings per week. People pulling their homes. Maybe they don't want to show it during the holidays. Maybe they have too much going on. I'm a big proponent, and we tend to have our best quarters in the third and fourth quarter simply because we're not afraid to go market those homes, because the benefit to you as a seller is if somebody walks through your door and it's 10 degrees out and they got to tromp through 6 inches of snow to get there, do you think that buyer's serious?
100%.
So we look at, Super Bowl weekend historically is kind of the kickoff of spring market in Minnesota.
Pun
even
intended.
though
Super Bowl's irrelevant. It hasn't been relevant in Minnesota forever.
This is true. So, but we look at that and say, okay, if you have 5 more homes in your neighborhood that are going to go on the market between end of February and the end of March, and you're competing with those, simple economics says you got to be the best value. And best value in the eyes of a buyer is more for the same or the same for less. And so it's got to be price driven, or you got to have some exceptional feature. And if you don't, you might not be the bride in that situation, right? You might be the bridesmaid. And so if you have zero competition, though, and you have buyers that are out there looking, they only have one option.
Yeah, absolutely. So we shared this story, but now we're sharing it with everybody else, is I was sitting at a closing waiting. It got delayed like 2 hours. So I'm sitting in the parking lot. I'm like, all right, I can't waste this time. I'm down in Edina. Like, I don't have an office down there. So I'm going to just go to work.
Your mobile office.
Exactly. It's an iPad.
Yeah. That's right.
But I went and I texted every single listing agent in Buffalo that had an active listing. Said, hey, we're kind of stale on this one. What are you seeing in the market? They're like, yeah, we're not getting any showings right now. I said, well, I'm not glad about that, but I'm glad we're not alone. But it was adequate it was good information for the seller to hear. It's like, okay, so that means, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is we either need to make a move against the market to be the next one to sell, or you just need to wait for the next buyer to jump off the fence. We elected to make the move on it, and they're like, yep, I think that's the right one, because we want to be the next one to sell. And it's really just having a professional agent to do that. You do that very well. I've seen some of your marketing material of just, you do a great job at communicating what to expect and properly set expectations. It's fantastic. Your entire team does that. You've got great training on it, which is fantastic.
Well, I think it all boils down to you and I obviously are a lot alike in this. We're not here to lie to you. Yeah. And the reality is that we've been at this long enough. We are not attached to your outcome. We just want to make it the best possible one that it can be. Right. And so to your earlier point, misery loves company in those situations, right?
Yeah.
It is a kind of a breath of fresh air, even though it's not good for anybody, that you're not the only listing that's selling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
But having those expectations, and this is where I appreciate your data, having those expectations set up front that, listen, this is the average market time, right? This is what we can expect. It tends to put people at ease when you communicate the truth. And there's nothing that can refute the average days on market, right? Maybe they've had, Aunt Donna tell them that their house needs to sell immediately, and otherwise their agent's not marketing it. The reality is that price is 80% of your marketing. And so if we don't hit that on the head, that's really the only thing that needs to change.
What a phrase I like to say, or what are the things that sell, real estate? Location, location, location. No, I wasn't going to be that cheeky about it, but it's price, condition, and location. Can't do anything about location. Price and condition are the two things that you can change. Now, we've certainly had conversation. Be careful on how much you increase, because you might be throwing good money after bad money, chasing a number that is kind of unknown, kind of like that Robert Frost, you take the path least traveled. Well, in real estate, you only get to choose one.
You get to choose one.
You don't get the best of both worlds, and because we've been doing it a long time, it's seen what we've seen with past customers, active customers, in conversation with other agents is like, I think based on our very particular situation right here, this is the path that we should be taking. Okay, great. Tuning into that market. Today, we just previewed homes today. We do it every single Tuesday. New listings in Buffalo and Monticello. And when we take a look at it, we're like, man, we kind of just rank them from the 7 that we saw. It's just like, that's probably going to be the next one to sell. Why? It smelled good. It looked good. The price was okay. Its price fits people's budget. And people are going to be shopping payments most likely than anything, or what their approval is. It's probably going to be the next one to sell. And it's like, we walked into, when we're done here, I got to show you a picture. Townhome, half a boat is sticking out of the garage, spray foamed around it to seal it into the garage.
Get out of here.
And that's how the neighborhood in a townhome was presented. And I'm just like, I feel so bad for those sellers because that's your next door neighbor and it looks awful. That's really gonna, sorry, that's skewed in there. But you know what? If you're sticking around this long, you're going to get some, behind the scenes stories just a little bit like that.
Yep.
But, in the days on market, statistics don't lie. You can get them to say whatever you want though. But again, I like to put a caveat there. When I'm looking at these days on market right here with 36 and 32 and everything, when I go back to the height of it and I just narrowed it down to what was in Buffalo, I think the lowest I saw was 4.2 average days on market. And that includes inspection timeframes and everything.
Unbelievable.
So, that wasn't fun either, for most people, because those 40 offers, 39 buyers were mad.
Yep. Well, and how many, we've all had buyers where we had to write 3, 4, 5, 10 for, just because of limitations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So it's interesting to look at it as a whole. Maybe we should put a pin in that return on investment story, right? For maybe another show down the road. But, I think the overall market as we're looking at is probably primed for some big things. I think there's some interesting things happen. A lot will be determined for next year as to what happens if Powell goes away and, a new Fed chairman's appointed.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe we want to wrap this up. I don't know how long we've been going, but
I don't know either. That's fine. I'm not sick of it yet.
Yeah. Nor am I. We need to have a little juice for our next one. I think a lot will be determined by that, kind of from the overarching view. If we're looking at rates and payments and all that, mentally, I've always found it helpful to think a 1% interest rate decrease will increase a borrower's purchasing power by 10%. So if your budget was 400 at 6%, right, and we drop to 5, you'll be able to go to 440. The problem is everyone's going to come out of the woodwork. And so now that house that you could have bought at 400 now costs you 440 as well.
Right. Yep.
And that's a lot of that shadow inventory if we can go back to that. Right. Yep. I think you and I both have buyers and sellers who say, I wish I would have. Right. Maybe back 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago even. Right. People that have they've been watching the market and there's not a need to move in that situation, right? It's
right.
If
the right thing comes up, we'll buy it.
If the right thing comes up, we'll buy it, right? But that's been itching at them for that long, and eventually that itch is going to need to get scratched.
It's so funny because once they put an offer in, whether they get it or not, they're buyers.
Yep, it's on.
They're like, oh no, we're not going to do this, but they go home. And they hate their living room.
And they
don't like it. They don't like it.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we've moved on. Dishes are going to be at the new one too. But
they're getting rid of all of it.
You're exactly right. The itch is there, and it's scratching every time they get a notification. Hey, new listing in your neighborhood.
Yep.
Hey, new listing. In having a good relationship or a go-to person. We do certainly enough networking, hey, we've got something coming up here. But we've also had people say, I don't want to be on the MLS right now, but if you could get me this, we would do that.
Yep.
We've all had deals like that.
Absolutely.
And for
Paul, shout out to Paul on our team. He put one together earlier this week. That was that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real situation.
Yeah. I off-market deals, as we're kind of winding down, please have a conversation with somebody you know, like, and trust. We hope that's us.
Yeah.
But go to somebody there. I also check ECRVs, things that happen off the market too.
Yep.
Data analysis. You're like, geez, no way that should have sold for that.
Right.
In the 100s, like whoever did that, and it was a big conglomerate that purchased it outright to them. I thought,
does it rhyme with Schmomstead Schmode?
Something very close to that. But I mean, it was just like, oh my goodness. And they immediately sold it back and they made a quick 6 figures on it. I thought, have a conversation with somebody you trust.
Yep.
again, we hope that this is us, but please call somebody you trust,
Yeah,
especially in a turning market.
Yeah. Well, and if there is uncertainty that exists, right? Like you said, reach out to somebody, like try and find certainty or some semblance of it to help you make the decision whether or not it's one of us or not, right? Because ultimately, the thing that we care about most is preserving our communities, making sure that the people are taken care of, positive first impressions.
There you go.
Making favorable impressions,
exactly.
right? Because listen, we live here too, right? Yeah. And our business grows to the extent that we do in the community. So
I think this has been very productive. I think it's been a good conversation. Maybe we didn't hit all the slides in super depth, but I think people really care about the conversation more than diving into that.
I think I'm the only thing I'm disappointed about is we didn't get a delicious dish reference.
Yeah. See, we put our headphones on. We would have. We would have. Maybe it hits the mark. Maybe it hits the internet. Maybe it doesn't. But,
who knows?
I look forward to. I think our goal was maybe do this quarterly.
Yeah. Why not?
Which I think is cool.
Or if something crazy happens, we'll just pop in and do a 10 minutes on one.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but Eric, thanks for coming into our studio here, and thanks for being the brainstorms behind this.
Thank you.
So, have a good one. We don't have a sign-off music or anything.
Peace.